This episode of Brew Bloods is brought to you by Warby Parker. Get 5 pairs to try on for free for 5 days by going to warbyparkertrial.com/brewbloods. That's warbyparkertrial.com/brewbloods.
It's like a pair a day.
Drink beer. Think beer. You're listening to Brew Bloods.
Without question, the greatest invention in the history of mankind is beer. Oh, I grant you that the wheel was also a fine invention, but the wheel does not go nearly as well with pizza.
It delivers pizza, though.
That from humorist Dave Barry. Beer delivers pizza?
Well, no, the wheel.
Oh, the wheel.
The wheel contributes to delivering pizza, or beer, really.
I don't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, but the pizza is also a wheel, so does it deliver itself ultimately?
That's a good question. It's not a good question, actually.
It's a terrible question.
Yeah.
Unless you have the turtle van, which is probably
made of pizza.
Got pizza hubcaps.
Right.
But that's not a thing. So
it's not a thing. That's true.
So, loyal listener of ours, Charles Passons, emailed us, and he wanted to comment on our diet talk last week, talking about trying to be more healthy.
Yeah.
And he said, listen to your new episode, thought I'd mention this diet that I'd started called the slow carb diet. It's basically meat, beans, and vegetables for 6 days and one cheat day where you do whatever you want. The guy who wrote this book literally said, if you want to drink an entire keg on cheat day, do it. I've come close. Alcohol poisoning.
Right.
But after 3 weeks, I'm down 14 pounds with no exercise. Pretty awesome. That from Jason.
Nice.
A.K.A. Charles, apparently.
Yeah.
Jason Charles.
Whichever name he wants to go
Whichever
by.
one he wants, yeah. So this is Tim Ferriss's, the 4-Hour Workweek guy. He had the, it was the sequel to the 4-Hour Workweek. And this
what about 3 hours, though?
No, not 3 hours, just 4 hours.
Oh, okay.
And I actually did slow carb for a while. And for me, it didn't work as well. Like, I did it for probably 6 months. I definitely lost some weight. It just didn't work because after that cheat day, like, I would eat 20,000 calories, mostly which are Reese's.
Right.
And then for, like, a majority of the rest of the week, I would be, like, bloated and, like, retain all this water weight and stuff until it would all come off. Yes, I lost weight, but...
Right.
I mean, I enjoy the cheat day. Don't get me wrong. It was a lot of fun, but it didn't work for me. But it's worked for a lot of people, so...
I was going to say, that might just be your weird body chemistry.
Yeah, it's the 4-Hour Body. It's the name of the... name is his sequel book, by the way.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's a fun one to do, especially to look forward to that cheat day and drink and eat all day.
Do whatever you want, yeah.
But yeah, the thing I'm doing right now, I've lost almost, as of today, 29.9 pounds. So,
oh, okay. Not quite the big 3-0?
Not quite, almost. It's very frustrating this morning. I was 0.1 away.
Yeah.
0.1.
Did you consider just stabbing yourself in the gut and pulling out just a handful?
Pulling out an intestine so I get that 0.1.
Whatever comes out, it doesn't matter, just as long as it's that much weight.
But for now, let's get to some brews in the news.
As always.
As always. So there was some big news this past week in that AB InBev and their high-end beer division decided to lay off 90% of its sales force.
Wow.
They recently, they have a nice round 10 breweries in their high-end portfolio now. And apparently with...
Goose is part of that, right? Is Goose AB InBev? I believe they are. So I wonder if that has anything to do with like these guys that went around and did this tour and everything that we just did with Goose. I wonder if Jesse's out of a job at this point.
I hope not.
No, I hope not but I'm just wondering at what element.
What Forbes reported was that anybody who was employed directly by the brewery, they did not lay them off. It appears that these were mostly salespeople. This was 380 employees and others that were, I guess, employees just of the high end, their craft quote unquote brewery division.
Right.
So all those I don't think Jesse and those guys that we talked to a few months ago, I think they're probably still employed, but
okay. Yeah, if it's people that didn't work directly with the brewery, then they'd be fine.
Yeah, and apparently with all these acquisitions, of course, it comes with their own employee staffs, and there were just a bunch of redundancies, and they said it was more effective for people who are working, from what I gather, people who are working directly at the brewery, who have relationships with distributors and stuff like that, for them to do more of the sales work, which makes sense if you know the beer better. And
makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, it actually makes sense. And the other big news, which didn't really get as much play around the interweb this week, was the fact that they have said they're not going to be acquiring any more breweries, allegedly. They've acquired 10 breweries, and they've decided to pivot, and they want to go more into collaborations and start organic craft beer brands in their portfolio now. So they recently opened up 10 Barrel, which used to be a craft brewery, and it's not one of the fake ones that they started.
Yeah, right.
They opened up a collaboration with the Bogota Beer Company from Colombia with a new brew pub in Miami. So that's kind of the direction they're going now.
Hopefully they make an Escobar beer.
Yeah. Yep, or maybe an El Chapo or El Mencho or...
Well, I don't think El Chapo's from that region.
Well, they should just make a whole theme like of drug lord, cartel lord beers.
Hey, that fits the craft beer scene.
They might want a little kickback from that, though.
Yeah, true.
Hopefully they all...
Well, that's why you go with the old dead ones like Escobar.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Not with the current crop.
Yep. So, sad news for those employees, but it kind of makes business sense.
Yeah, it actually does. And it's interesting that they wanted to start doing collaborations.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to do like real collaborations or what exactly that means, because you know how craft brewers actually do that all the time. They're like, oh, we made this one-off beer. But what does Budweiser have to contribute to that unless they're going to collaborate on a lager? They don't really have any other styles in their like basic portfolio. No,
but they've got all these guys in their craft beer portfolio now that
if they're going to use those 10 guys, I get it, but
which is what they did. They used the 10 barrel people, and they collaborated with the Bogota beer people, and they made a new brew pub called Vesa Sur, if I'm pronouncing that right, in Miami, which I guess by the time you hear this, Miami may be wiped out by a hurricane, but
that's true.
But yeah, I guess that's kind of what they're planning to do now, is not, at least for now, not acquire anymore.
Okay, well, we'll see if they actually stick to that.
Yeah.
So we had other big news around here. At least,
sad news.
Yeah, so sad. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I've been a big Ninkasi homer for years. Always liked it. Was pretty excited that it came here. Was pretty excited that they chose Dallas out of everywhere to actually enter Texas. I kind of figured it would be Austin, honestly, but you know, they tried DFW.
That was what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2015, and they have ended up leaving due to lack of demand in the DFW area. And the article that explains what's going on with this, and Ninkasi's statement, was basically that they gave a lot of effort, they put out a lot of promotions, but basically they weren't getting any kind of return on investment, or not enough to stay around here, so they decided to go ahead and pick up and move. So to me, it's beyond just the Ninkasi leaving Dallas-Fort Worth area or leaving Texas. It's the question of, is there saturation in the market? Is there now such a hyper-focus on local versus having a big craft beer guy come in, quote-unquote? I'm just wondering what would have led to that. I don't know if maybe Ninkasi didn't market here properly, which to me, as a Ninkasi fan, I think they probably did not. I don't think they made, even in their quote-unquote heyday of 2015 when they made the big premiere, a lot of their signature stuff was not available very often.
That's what I was about to say, is like, we had like Triceratops was, you could find it okay at first, but then it just like, in the subsequent months, it was so hard to find after that.
Yeah, you couldn't barely find it at all. You could find Total Domination or their big special release. That's pretty much all they would do. Like the Ninkasi 10.
Slayer.
Yeah. The
Vanilla Otis.
Red, yeah. The Vanilla Otis is a regular that was around a lot, but for some reason it was only like maybe 3 or 4 from their portfolio.
Yeah, it was just a handful. And I would say, they say they spent a lot of money. I guess they probably did, but I don't think they spent it smartly then, because there were never, like, when Odell came in a few months ago, and still to this day, giant Odell displays in Total Wine and specs. I never saw that from Ninkasi. Ninkasi is every time I've been to Total Wine looking for it, it's always, in Whole Foods too, always bottom shelf.
Yeah.
Always out of the way, nondescript, hardly any beers on the shelf. And it has been that way for over a year. Yeah. So I question how well if they spent a lot of money, I don't want to question that, but they didn't spend it very well, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to the fact, just to give myself as an example, because I was an Ninkasi homer, I used to always bring it back whenever I went up to Oregon or Washington or wherever I could get it.
Yeah. And
so I was very excited to be around. I didn't really go for it that often because they did not have the couple of theirs that I really like around very much. I mean, Vanilla Otis is good. Their Spring Green and then some other ones they do are fine. But at the same time, it's like, if you get some Triceratops and I don't have to hunt for the 2 bottles you can find at one Total Wine randomly, I probably would have got that regularly. But I'm not just gonna pick up Total Domination or these others that I don't like as much just to support Ninkasi.
And I would say like the N10 was a tremendous failure here. I can't speak to other markets, but there was a glut of N10 on the shelves.
Yes.
Ground Control initially I thought was a success, and then after that there was a glut of Ground Control after that. Other than that, we didn't see anything outside of Slayer, Dawn of the Red, Triceratops, Vanilla Otis, and the other one you mentioned.
Yeah, the spring rain was around.
Yeah, five beers year round, and that was about it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do wonder if that does have something to do with the fact, well, I don't wonder, I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the fact that DFW does have a local craft boom as well, and I do think craft brewers, or craft beer drinkers, do like to go local. They make a point in this article, and this is from Beer News, and they are sponsored by Flying Saucer, and Flying Saucer was basically talking about how, in this article, they felt like maybe they failed a bit of actually explaining how good the Ninkasi beers were to people, and that kind of thing. There is probably a lack of education to an extent that this is a new thing. They didn't make a big push. I think it's a combo of things. It's what you said. They didn't market themselves very well. They should have had an actual Ninkasi rep on occasion show up to one of the beer festivals. They always had some third-party spare that didn't know anything about it. Just, do you want this or do you not?
And even then, they didn't bring variants. They brought their standard shelf beer.
And they brought it in a nondescript cooler. Yeah. You know, I mean, didn't have any signage. It's like they didn't really make a big push.
It's the same argument we have against Jester King. So Jester King has the cachet across the country that everybody seeks out.
Right. Yeah, Ninkasi's like number 33 biggest craft brewery or something. So they're pretty good size, but I mean, that's Eugene, Oregon is a remote outpost way away from here. Right. You know, and I if you're going to try to expand down here and DFW is going to be your test market, you really need to put a lot of effort in here, or more effort than they did, I think. I don't even know, as much of an Ninkasi homer as I was, if I'm really going to miss them that much, just because, again, I didn't go for what they were bringing around here. But I do wonder, and I'm curious about your opinion on this too, do you think we're getting to the point where we have so much local stuff and we already have so many marquee things like Two Hearted Ale, just for an example, that people are going to go for the really marquee out-of-state beers like Two Hearted? And then other than that, do you think maybe locals have covered a lot of the other styles and needs for most people? Yeah,
and it's probably the kind of the reshaping of the market in general, is everybody focusing more. Well, there's such a broad spectrum of beer now, and everybody, at least I can't speak to other markets, but at least here in Texas, we have a lot of breweries that do a damn fine job of covering those styles. And then there's the reshaping of the market to be hyper-local, and people seek out that local stuff first. So it's like I do question I wonder how well Adele is doing, and they've had a big marketing splash in the last 6 months. Yeah, and I wonder how well they're doing. I'm guessing they're going to get to a point where they probably pull back some of that marketing costs. Sure, and we'll find a sustainable point. But
and if you don't have a signature beer too, and I'm not saying Ninkasi doesn't because I do think. They do. I think their Tricera hops is one of the better double IPAs in the market, or anywhere. I think, their special release Otis's are really good, which they didn't really give us too many of them. They give us all their special releases and push those hard, like the N10 and the ground control and stuff, but they just didn't push their marquee regular beers, I don't think, near well enough. Right. So I'm not saying they don't have any signature beers, because they do, but I think it's also the fact that, just for example, Total Domination made it into places like Kroger and Target and stuff like that. That is a very standard IPA that can be bested by Deep Ellum, which I consider to be a very standard IPA, but I think it's better than the Total Domination. I think, things like Mosaic and other ones around here are actually signature IPAs. Like, if you're going to go for IPA, I want to go for a signature, really good IPA. I'm not going to go for a very baseline. It's not even, I'd say not even, Two Hearted Ale is one of the best IPAs in the nation. But, that has a citrus special note to it. That there's nothing special about Total Domination. It's just like it tastes a lot like a generic Brewers, I had to throw an IPA in their IPA. And that's the one they were kind of hanging their hat on. Yeah. I don't understand why they did that. I think they kind of messed themselves up in a couple of ways.
I agree. I think as when it comes to spending money too, I think whatever you think about Odell, good, bad, or otherwise, I think they spent their money the right way, because not only did they have displays in stores, they had events. They made a special beer for Texas, even though we didn't like that beer. That was a great move on their part to make.
The special beer for Texas was Bell's.
I'm sorry, I said Odell. I've been saying Odell this entire time, and I meant Bell's. Odell's been here for a long time. I meant Bell's. Yeah. But anyways, Bell's spent their money really well and smartly. Whatever you think about them, and that's something I think Ninkasi completely lacked. They need somebody to steer that ship.
And I think to the question I posed to you, my response to it would also be that I don't necessarily think that there's a problem with out-of-state brewers coming in until we start seeing other ones leave. Like if we see Odell that you've kept saying, if they leave,
or Bell's
pulls out, especially something like Founders randomly pulls out or something, then you're going to be like, okay, well, we're getting really hyper local and nobody cares about even the bigger craft breweries. But I don't see that happening. If I see that happening, then I'll say, okay, yeah, maybe we're getting too hyper local, like they talked about in this article, and people just don't know that there are better options that are from quote unquote big craft breweries.
Yeah.
I like Black Adiddas, that kind of stuff. If those start going away,
they're backed by big money now, so I doubt.
True, yeah, good point.
They can afford those big displays all the time,
right?
So Oktoberfest is coming up here shortly, and we're going to have a very special episode for Oktoberfest coming up next week.
So special.
But Adiddas has made special shoes for Oktoberfest 2017 called the München Oktoberfest shoes, and they are made from the finest leather and DBPR material, aka durable beer and puke resistant material. And it also includes each pair includes rich embroidery to match your lederhosen.
Nice.
And they're actually pretty nice shoes. If you go to Crave online, you can probably find these. They're called the München Oktoberfest, and these shoes will run you only €199 or $240 US.
Crave online sounds like some kind of porn site.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or something about fetishes or something.
It's just about...
I take it it's not that.
It's just about beer-resistant shoes. It's a very limited blog.
That's it?
I hope these things are pee-resistant also. If it was like that one time when we were at Gas Monkey and that guy...
Yeah.
I almost got in a fight because the guy turned around and intentionally peed right on my shoes.
Yes.
I will buy a pair of these if they're pee-resistant also. Urine resistance.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't throw those over the top of the stall and hit him in the face with it.
Should have. Yeah, well, it wasn't even that. It was like just a little half wall
in
the urinals. Okay. And he just whacked his wang over and peed right on my foot and started laughing about it.
Nice. He must have been way drunk.
Yeah. And there was almost a fight, and there would have been if my wife hadn't pulled me out of Gas Monkey and took me the damn hell home.
Yeah. Did you tell him he was a big jerk? Because that definitely is.
You are a jerk.
That's a jerk move.
It is. All right, well, after this, we're going to talk to Andrew Gill, the former co-host of Strange Brews, the WBEZ beer podcast, the only public radio-sponsored podcast, craft beer podcast back in the day, ended back in 2015. But he's been writing for the Onions AV Club for a long time now. He writes the monthly Pick Six column as well as other random beer articles here and there.
So he writes about interceptions in the NFL?
That's absolutely.
All right.
This episode of Brew Bloods is brought to you by Warby Parker, the longtime internet glasses maker. Generic.
Did they make them on the internet?
They make them on the internet. Literally, their glasses are made of ones and zeros.
That's very advanced.
Yeah, they are. They have prescription glasses starting at $95, and I know you don't have kids, but a lot of people out there have children that like to reproduce. And some of those kids like me, needed glasses when they're starting at 3 years old.
That's true, and neither one of us are reproducing now, so...
That's right.
And I don't need glasses, but you do.
But I do, and I still need to get on that. I'm dragging my heels on that. But you might have a small 3-year-old that needs glasses, perhaps a 13-year-old, perhaps a 30-year-old that needs glasses.
That's true.
And you can get those prescription glasses starting at $95, and they're always fashion forward if you care about that.
We can be quite a Warby Parker group here, because my wife, your wife, and you.
That's right.
All glasses wearers.
We could be the Three Musketeers of Warby Parker glasses.
I can just applaud you guys walking down the street in your Warby Parkers.
I'm going to get right on that. Just to have that name. It's going to be the Three Musketeers of Warby Parker glasses.
You better. It's a hot commodity.
Very specific.
Somebody probably already took it.
So if you'd like to try some frames from Warby Parker, you can go to warbyparkertrial.com/brewbloods. That's warbyparkertrial.com/brewbloods and get 5 pairs for 5 days for free to try on.
Hey guys, Josh here, just to let you know, to remind you, to get the word out, to put it in your brain, that no matter when you're listening to this podcast, Thursday is right around the corner. What's so significant about Thursday? Well, at Thursday at noon, you get to tune in and listen live to Liquid Lunch. Join myself and Catherine Contreras from She's Crafty Podcast as we join forces to bring you Texas's live midday craft beer show. It's the only one like it out there in the entire world. We're live. We take your calls at 713-678-0070. We have on the best guests in the craft beer world from the state of Texas and beyond, and it's just a fun time. You'll hear what you eatin', What You Drinking. We'll get the latest in news and craft beer goings-ons, promotions of all the latest happenings, and you can be a part of the show with us each and every Thursday at noon. LiquidLunchShow.com is where we're located. Also on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, streaming live video and audio. Your choice. Come join the party. Kick off the weekend, Thursday at noon. LiquidLunchShow.com. That's Liquid Lunch. We'll see you there.
Hooray for beer!
And now we're joined by Andrew Gill, the columnist for the Onion AV Club's Pick Six column, and the former co-host of WBEZ's Strange Brews podcast. Andrew Gill, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I haven't been talking about beer for a little while. I've just been writing, so it's nice to talk about beer again.
Yeah, it's great to hear your voice again. I was a big fan of your show before it ended back in 2015. And I've read your columns now and again on the AV Club. And your most recent article, I was really interested in because we've been talking about the subject about how independent could or should and could craft beer be. And since 2015, obviously the landscape has changed a ton. The Brewers Association came out with that independent craft beer seal. And there's been a whole lot of fighting, and I've seen a lot here in our local Facebook groups because of that. So what compelling arguments have you heard maybe against the Brewers Association lately? Because it seems they're seeing a lot more consternation against them lately.
Yeah, generally, it seems like the independent craft seal is a good idea, but it seems like this is the point where the chickens are coming home to roost for the Brewers Association, because over so many years they've sort of eroded the definition of craft beer. Well, first of all, they chose craft beer to be the term, that would like be the rallying cry for this movement of new brewers in America. And I believe, Ray Daniels, the guy who created the Cicerone program, I've heard him talk about, he used to work for the Brewers Association, and back when he was there, 80s or so, he was involved in coming up with the term craft beer and choosing it. But they've eroded the definition of it in some people's eyes because, they've been pursuing growth. They wanted to show that the sector of the industry was growing and was a formidable, business. And so they, allowed bigger and bigger breweries to remain in craft brewing. Most folks say, however big Sam Adams gets is what the limit will be. So it's at 6 million barrels is the limit right now. And that leaves such a wide area of breweries, they have nothing to do with each other. If you're Sam Adams or that size, what do you have in common with a 2,000 barrel a year brewery that only sells out of their tap room? That's a lot of different concerns, and how can this one organization represent all of those competing interests at the same time? I don't know that it's in my opinion, I don't think that ship has sailed yet, but yeah, that's what a lot of the criticism comes down to. It's that they allow up to 25% ownership by another organization or another brewery, but they also don't have any guidelines on private equity investments or, other kinds of corporate owners that could, control what the brewery chooses to do. So there's that blind spot. There's the ownership by other breweries. There's the size, and the whole small, independent, and traditional used to be the three words for the Brewers Association, and traditional is not even really required anymore because they decided to allow like Yingling and breweries that if you include things that are beyond the 4 traditional ingredients of beer, that's okay as long as, you mostly do traditional beer. So it's just sort of like a slippery slope, and they've lost a lot of their sort of authority by seeding that ground in pursuit of growth.
Do you think they're trying to either A, ward off irrelevance, or B, do you think they're pushing themselves towards irrelevance?
That's a good question. I haven't actually interviewed the Brewers Association on this, but it seems like they're their view would be warding off irrelevance, and finally putting a line in the sand with this independent craft label, which is kind of a shot across the bow that undermines the strategy that the high end and Constellation and Heineken have been employing by buying other breweries and then not putting their corporate name on it. It muddies the waters and makes craft beer mean less when anybody could own any beer that you buy with an interesting label. So if you have that sort of like stamp on all these beers that they are not allowed to put on, that would stymie this strategy for at least a while until they figure something else out. So I think it is warding off the irrelevance because, they were ceding a lot of ground, and now they've finally said, all right, well, this is where we're staking our claim. And I think it's interesting. I think I understand why some breweries haven't signed on to do it. It's expensive to buy, 1 million more cans for your next batch of beer and get the designs done. It's a cost that breweries might not have budgeted for, things like that. But I do hope that as many as possible sign on, so that, we can just see what effect does this have on the industry? Because if it doesn't actually take hold widely enough, it's going to be kind of like a mistrial. It'll be like, oh well, it wasn't executed fully, so we won't ever know if the consumers really care. So,
and another side effect, not only just having to buy more cans and redesign. I don't know how it is for other states, but here in Texas, anytime you change the label whatsoever, you have to go through a new round of label approval with the TABC. So the federal thing, too. You would have to resubmit, And that might cause, depending on your state's standards, that could cause some re-examination of content of your labels. I mean, there's been, of course, certain breweries have what some would consider lewd terms or imagery or what have you on their labels. And in certain cases, they fly under the radar and they get through those associations. In other cases, they get rejected. And so if they have to go through approval again, I mean, they might see their brand name, their beer name, get rejected again, or their imagery or something. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I feel like that's a thing that the Brewers Association also just took a stand on, which caused Flying Dog to just leave the Brewers Association, which I assume you guys are aware of that story, but
yeah.
I think I'm all for that. I don't think there's anyways, I'm a feminist, so
sure,
I don't think that we need to have beers with those kinds of images and stuff out there. They're free to make them. They just don't have to be a member of the Brewers Association, I guess.
Sure.
I mean, really, Flying Dog was not even being told to change their labels, so I think that was kind of a hissy fit to leave over that, because they were being grandfathered in specifically, being told, you don't have to change anything, this is fine, but we don't want it to go farther than this, I guess, is kind of the idea. But yeah, I mean, it's a much more active Brewers Association, it seems, like telling people what they should and shouldn't do. And I've talked to a couple of people, like my brother-in-law, since Strange Brews went off the air, my brother-in-law has invested in a brewery in Tallahassee, and I was just talking with him about, they don't bottle any beers yet, but you could still put a sign up in the window that says independent craft, and he was circumspect about that. He's like, well, we got to really evaluate. And then when I go to tap rooms, I'll ask the bartender if they're going to put it up, and usually they don't know. They're just like, I don't know. It's not really. They're like, people like us are talking and thinking about this a lot more than some of the people who actually work in the industry, it seems. So.
Yeah, and I don't
know. Actually, you guys might. Do you guys work in the industry? I don't know.
No, we don't. We're just consumers.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually wondered how much it really impacts any non-beer nerd consumer anyways. How many people in the larger drinking community will even care, at large. I mean, there will be a certain number of people like us that will, of course, but ultimately, will it matter? Will it be will it really hit your bottom line to add this seal or not?
And I feel like it probably, the average beer buyer is not going to care. They're probably going to look for, how much it costs and if it looks cool, and if their friends are, if the group of people they're buying beer for are all going to like this, this same beer. That's usually the thing I run into. I want to buy some weird beer, and my wife is like, everyone's going to hate that beer. Like, you have to get the mixed 12-pack or something,
Yeah.
So, I do think it's a useful data point, like right now I'm in Anaheim, California at a conference. I went to a convenience store last night, and I was trying to figure out, I'm always trying to taste new beers so that I can write about a bigger variety of stuff in my column. And, there were a bunch of breweries I'd never heard of, and if they had that seal on there, it would have given me that much more information to make my decision, like, what am I going to buy here in this convenience store? Sure. I think a lot of people buy something if it's certified organic, or like I try to buy fair trade coffee, like just because I've visited some coffee farms in Central America, and so I want them to get a fair wage. And so I always buy fair trade coffee. I think there are consumers like that might factor it into their decisions that aren't already aware of what's going on. So, but yeah, travel would be a big thing when you're in an area you're not familiar with. You're looking at a bunch of beers you've never had before, and you want to just know quickly, like, is this a real brewery or is this like a pseudo brand, or what, so getting that label tells me something. So. Yeah,
I hadn't thought about the fair trade. So if you have the conspicuous consumer, the one that's very socially conscious like that, like I'm the same way. I always buy fair trade organic coffee. So it's something I hadn't really thought of, that there's that certain sector of the community, probably outside the beer nerds, that will probably want to support the local community and support the true independent.
Yeah, and I did a little research into the fair trade label after I thought about this comparison, and it's actually, I think you have to pay to get that label, and it's been criticized that it hasn't been all that successful, but I do think it's a good analogy because it's not about what's in the product. It's like organic is telling you, there's no pesticides or whatever, and this was grown a certain way. But the independent craft label doesn't tell you anything about what the beer is going to taste like or how it was made, really. It just tells you what the company is like that made it. So in that way, I think that it relates a little bit better to like independent, or to fair trade, or even like a real dairy label or something like that. So yeah, I still don't think I've seen it in the wild at a store, but have you guys seen it anywhere?
No, I haven't. But then again, I'm also thinking it's kind of early on, considering how recent that seal came about, plus getting new cans and then manufacturing on top of it.
Right. I've seen social media, like pictures from different breweries that are like, here's our can with the label, but I haven't actually seen one of those in the store. So.
No, I haven't either. I suspect it's going to be a little while yet. But so speaking of kind of that independent hyperlocal community, you mentioned in your article that the future of beer is hyperlocal, and we in general tend to agree on the show. And then You once said that you were surprised by, you said, quote, how seriously beer geeks take certain issues and how little interest they seem to have in others. And one example of this was localism. Drinkers will often say they prefer to drink local beer, but they often don't ask where the ingredients in the beer were produced. So, is this trend towards hyper-localism, and we've seen this week, Ninkasi left Texas, and on our local Facebook group, all we saw was, oh, they're overrated, they all had a bunch of money, that's the only reason they were able to get out of Oregon, they're complete drain pours. I mean, we see this over and over again with good breweries. So, how is it, you're probably much more aware of the nationwide point of view on this. Have you seen it? I mean, you've said this before, and apparently it's just, I think it's gotten worse. Is hyperlocalism really a good thing?
I mean, I think that I think you can't really group. Yeah, you got to separate out beer from like the locavore food movement, which I think is what I was getting at with that point. Like getting a local beer is not like getting your tomatoes at the farmer's market. It's not actually like a product of that place, like it doesn't have the terroir or whatever, unless, you can add some terroir with like wild yeast, I guess, and, certain, adjunct ingredients, but really, you're probably not getting all your barley and hops and whatever from your own area. There are a few exceptions to that, which are interesting. But I think the thing that's happened more recently, though, in the past 2 years, you guys well know this, I'm sure, is that these breweries that expanded like Sierra Nevada, the ones that opened in North Carolina, like Sierra Nevada, New Belgium, Oscar Blues, like they expected all this pent-up demand to continue and keep growing at 15% or whatever, 20%, like Lagunitas, there was 1 year when they like grew by like 70% capacity or something, when they first went to Chicago. But that's not really happening now. And more states are allowing taproom sales and self-distribution. And I think that just from the business side, like the equation makes a lot more sense now for a lot more breweries to just sell, their limited amounts, less than 10,000 barrels a year, maybe just 2,500, and make a decent living, and not always intend to keep scaling up. Like we had the Revolution Brewing as a brewery that opened in Chicago probably, 7 years ago. And they shot up to like about 100,000 barrels a year almost by now. And, they've got limited distribution. They're only in maybe 3-4 states at this point. But, it was fast. And recently there was a survey but data released by this point of sale company, BevSoft, about the most ordered beer in Chicago, by name. At least this is just facility, this is only businesses that use this software, but it was Miller Lite, and then it was Revolution Anti-Hero IPA. It was the second most popular just plain beer in Chicago, which is a pretty astounding thing,
That's great.
To be, more name recognition than Budweiser, or asked for by name more than Bud or Bud Light or MGD or, whatever. So that's a huge thing. And I don't think that breweries are going to do that anymore, because that's when you get into the pressure, because you have a huge debt, to get up to that point, so say you open a brewery. I've never opened a brewery, but this is what I gather from observing the industry and interviewing people. You open a brewery, and your first year you might be able to make, if you're like a expansion oriented, got a lot of investors, maybe the first year you make 10,000 barrels, and then the demand is so good that you add a few more fermenters, and then the next year you can make 15, but then you also had to borrow $500,000 for those fermenters or whatever it is, and so then your debt load just keeps increasing, and the way that you increase the revenues is by making more beer, but to make more beer, you take on more debt, and then it becomes this vicious cycle of like, oh, we got to keep expanding so that we keep making more beer and keep making more money so that we can pay off this debt. And then, so it's got this sort of like cycle that you get into, it seems. But, if you kind of opt out of that, you can be a slow growth kind of local tap room only or self-distributed bottles and cans, something like that. Then you aren't taking on huge debt loads. You don't have as much stress over, meeting your obligations every month. So you're also less likely to take an offer from, AB InBev when they come and want to buy your brewery, or when a private equity company wants to buy half of your brewery or something, and give up control. So then you can just keep your business independent, because you're getting a much bigger share of those profits too. You're not cutting in a distributor at that point, so if you're selling your beer in your tap room, you're getting a much bigger percentage of the profit after making the beer than you would if you were scaling up and you're cutting in the distributor, and then you got to pay for marketing and you got to pay for shipping and all that stuff,
Right.
So that's my understanding of where things are going.
Do you think that craft beer is in a bubble and it's about to pop?
No, I don't think so. I think there's a huge space for more breweries to open, as long as they're not planning to go giant. You could have, like, I don't have a brewery that I could walk to right now in Chicago. There's a few that I could, might be a mile or two walk, but like there's not one in my neighborhood that I'd just like pop around to and get an amazing, IPA at. So I think if one did open, it would probably have pretty decent business, and there's all kinds of towns all across the country that don't have a great brewery yet. So yeah, I mean, I think that the conventional wisdom is changing right now, and so that might appear like a bubble pop because people that, invested in breweries 2 years ago expecting to get X return on their investment are maybe going to be disappointed. Because it's not like a get rich quick, or like it's not a gold mine.
Yeah, the gold rush is over.
Yeah, I feel like the gold rush is over, but I don't know that the bubble will pop necessarily. Maybe some people who are like, oh, I didn't actually want to have to do the day in, day out work of running a brewery for the foreseeable future. Like maybe those folks might get out of it, and those facilities might close, but I don't know if it's a bubble,
Maybe a bit of a recession, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a contraction or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I the whole thing about the Ninkasi as a drain pour, like that's a whole part of the industry that I would be happy to see go away.
Yeah.
I get so tired of that stuff. It's just like it's so like alpha male, kind of like I'm a big, and that's a lot of the beer discussion. Like I participate in it all the time, but some of the time I'm just like tired of it. Just sort of, it's sort of like playing armchair business analyst or something.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about.
Yeah, I found myself opting out of those discussions, and really more and more out of, especially kind of social media discussions in general, just because, especially stuff like that, like people get so vile about it. So.
Yeah. There are certain Twitter accounts that might be also based in Chicago that I'm not going to name, but that will browbeat people if they disagree with their business analysis. And I really don't have the energy, or I don't need to involve myself in that stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of Strange Brews questions?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So, with Strange Brews, you had the only public radio podcast about beer, and as far as I know, it's still the only one to this day. So, they said, towards the end there, from what I read, WBEZ said that it wasn't, I guess, profitable enough to sustain. So, I understand that. I guess I understand that reason. I've always questioned, how much money is going, because to me it doesn't take that much money to put up a podcast, right? So I always question. I don't work for NPR, I don't know their business numbers, all that, but I've always had to question that myself. But I was wondering, why didn't you and Allison continue Strange Brews as a podcast by yourself? Was it WB's brand and they opted to hold on to it, or were you guys just putting it to bed and done with it?
Yeah, it was WBEZ's their brand, because we started it as employees. So I was doing it, as on my day job time for WBEZ, and so that was a cost, I guess, to them,
Right.
And they owned the name and didn't want to give it up. So
Yeah.
So Allison and I, we explored a few new other options, like maybe doing some documentary film or something about the brewing industry, something like that. Nothing's panned out quite yet. And then I kind of got into the writing stuff with the AV club. So, I've got a 3-year-old kid, so that's about all the time I've got.
Yeah, fair enough.
To do one extra thing. So, and Allison is now the artistic director of the Chicago Humanities Festival. So,
okay.
she's got a big job now, and she gets to do interviews with big thought leaders and stuff. So actually, she's going to have an event coming up with Joe Swanberg, the director of Drinking Buddies, one of our early guests on Strange Brews. They're going to do it at the Dovetail Brewery in Chicago, coming up in September, I think. So.
And you're still working for WBEZ?
Yeah, I'm at WBEZ, and I've been a digital producer this whole time as my job, and I've gone back to doing what I was doing before Strange Brews some, but with slightly different focus. So I'm kind of heading up photos and videos for our web and social media projects and stuff like that. So I'm working with the editorial side of BEZ, reporters and stuff like that. So I won a couple of awards this year, so I'm not only I've won awards for things besides beer podcasting now. So
congratulations!
Thank you.
So, weren't you working on a book at one point that was called "Drinking Woman" or something like that?
Oh no, my wife. Yeah, my wife started a sort of cooking, like a food blog. Interview kind of website, and she is still kind of doing that. It's sort of morphed into more of like a recipe development sort of thing. Mm-hmm. She was doing interviews, and I would do photos with like people in the beverage industry, but just the time it takes, we haven't been doing it as much lately. Again, 3-year-old kids.
So
and she's got a day job too. So
yeah, that takes up enough of its own time. Stupid paying jobs.
Yeah.
So 2 more questions. How do you think the beer change has changed since you ended Strange Brews back in 2015?
Well, I mean, I did kind of, it was convenient to say it, but it was right around the time that Lagunitas sold 50% to Heineken when we ended the podcast. And I really did feel like that was a shift, maybe not as seismic of a shift as has happened in the past year or two. But I did feel like that was kind of the beginning of the end of that era. So, like you could mark 2011 is when Goose Island sold to ABI. It was the first big, craft brewery sale to them. And then once Lagunitas was the biggest critic of Goose Island for years, very publicly, and so once they finally sold 50%, I feel like that is kind of a pretty neat bookend. But now that they've sold out the other 50% as well, and all these other breweries have sold to AB InBev, I do feel like that is a real, like I guess how long has it been? 2 years since Strange Brews? 3 years?
2 years.
Those 2 years were like kind of a long goodbye to that era of craft beer. And now I do feel like we're firmly into a new thing.
It's been a definite sea change for sure.
And I think it's exciting still. I think there's, the idea that like you can't know all the breweries now is exciting to me. That like I can make an effort to be well read and well versed, but I'm never going to know all the breweries, and that's fine. I know what I know, and I can do good research. But yeah, like I know that you've probably had some amazing beers from breweries that I've never heard of in Texas, and that's cool. And I don't need you to ship me that beer. Like, I'm glad that you have it there. And if I go to Texas, I'll try it,
Yeah.
And I'll try. I don't even have time to try all the Chicago breweries, like I got my time. There's more beer than I can drink, it's all good. So.
All right. Well, last question, referring back to your article from this past week. How independent should craft beer be?
I mean, I think that maybe different terms are what we need. I was actually joking about this idea on Twitter with Jason Noddy, the guy who I talked about in the article who published this like fake indie beer list. He was criticizing breweries for taking private equity funding and not being transparent about it, and yet being big proponents of the independent craft label. And I was like, maybe we need like multiple brewers associations, like one for tiny breweries and one for larger non-corporate breweries, and then there could be this sort of like lobbying group that would like sort of represent the interests of these smaller places, and it could have a more meaningful definition for that group. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, the point I make at the end of the article, I think, is one that I believe more and more now since I wrote it, is that, like I live in Chicago. I'm lucky I can get so many good beers, but someone who lives, I don't know, in some town I've never heard of in Nebraska, maybe they get some New Belgium, and that New Belgium is a pure brewery still, even if they are selling Voodoo Ranger IPA, and it doesn't look like they're an independent brewery, but they're employee owned. So, but like Dogfish Head or one of these Lagunitas or something, if that's all that you can get in that town, like, go for it. I don't want you to feel guilty about buying Lagunitas. Like, totally fine by me, even if you bought a ABI beer, that's your thing, it's not everybody has the same things available to them. So I don't want to be in a place of judging them, the breweries that I'm going to get really excited about and actually like put the time and mental energy into like following and like seeking out, those probably will be the totally independent small breweries. And if one of those were to sell out or something, I would still feel a little sad, but I'm probably not going to like disown them. You know what I mean? That's kind of an equivocating answer. But you know, I don't want to be one to judge like someone who's trying to get new beers and get more interesting beers and understand what's going on. Like, I'm not going to judge them if they don't have all these like small independent breweries available to them. So we should make it easier, not harder, for people to know if they're buying independent beer. I think that's true. So, and to that respect, the independent craft label is useful. Maybe if you know, this more pure version of the Brewers Association that I was just hypothesizing about, if they wanted to come up with an extra label that's even more, you know, like a right side up can or something, I don't know, like, if they wanted to do that, that would be great too. You know, the more independent, the better for me, because I know about this industry and this stuff. So for my personal taste, I would say I want it to be as independent as possible. But again, I'm not going to judge people who drink beers that aren't. If you're drinking good beer, that's good. And if you learn more about it and become educated about it, I think there's a case to be made for independent breweries being a force for good in the country. You know, like, that's, to me, like, at my most idealistic about beer, I feel like craft beer could be a force to sort of like radically remake the post-industrial fabric of America. You know, it's the manufacturing, it creates jobs, it binds together local communities, it makes local communities unique. You know, it gives people a point of pride. You know, it's a real strong, potent force, and it's the most potent when it's independent. But again, it's also someone else's business that they need to make a living off of, and they've got to make the decisions they have to make. So yeah, they should just be transparent, be upfront about it. If you explain, you know, why you had to take an investment or something, I think people are more understanding. That coming from someone who's like not in the business world, you know. Yeah. I'm sure that would be terrible advice if you were a CEO or something.
Just be as transparent as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can find Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Gill, that's Gill, or you can find him on avclub.com. Just look for his Pick 6 column. There'll be a link to the article in the show notes. And you write that article about the first week of every month, correct?
Yep. And I've got a few more non-Pick 6 articles coming up soon. So I just turned in a beginner's guide to Oktoberfest beers to run in the next week or two. So that should be up soon. I'm working on something about home brewing, so do something on that soon. So yeah, AV Club is the main place to find that.
Well, thanks for listening to episode 115 of Brew Bloods. Thanks to Andrew Gill from the Onion's AV Club and the Pick 6 column for joining us on the show today.
I know he appreciated my questions.
Yeah, you were great.
They were
you were so informative. I don't know why you walked... what you don't know, to pull back the curtain, is as soon as he heard Andrew Gill was going to be on the show, Dustin tore off his non-prescription glasses, threw them to the ground, smashed them, and walked out of the room.
I rage flipped my own desk.
That's right.
Walked out of here.
That's right. I had to hold everything together with baling wire and duct tape just to get that interview done.
You did a good job with that. I'm glad you always have baling wire on you, just for such occasion.
Baling wire, everything is a baling wire emergency all the time.
Yes.
Well, thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for your support. We appreciate it. If you don't subscribe to the show, you should. Just go to brewbloods.net. There are links there to subscribe to the show, or go to your favorite podcast player, and there's always a search engine there. Just search for us, Brew Space Bloods, and you can find it. Subscribe. We'd appreciate it.
And it's free. It's free.
And
no subscription cost.
No subscription cost whatsoever. If you have any friends that enjoy podcasts, enjoy craft beer, just point them our way. We would really appreciate it. Please tell your friends. And if you have a minute, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd appreciate that as well.
Really, if you have an enemy that likes it.
Yeah.
Just be like, screw you, listen to this podcast. That's fine.
if you have a 104-year-old grandmother that has somehow lived despite drinking 6 beers a day, and she might have a ripped 6-pack, some
maybe
pecs,
and she likes craft beer.
She likes craft beer. Point her away. Maybe she likes podcasts. Maybe she's a modern hip grandma.
At 140.
At 140, that's right. Check us out on the social networks. Tell them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you have any feedback on the show, you can email us at brewbloodshow@gmail.com, or you can call us at 469-573-BEER. That's 469-573-2337. And thanks to Jason Charles Passons for emailing us this week.
Yes.
All right, for Dustin, I'm Mark.
For Mark, I'm Dustin. Prost.